We can be addicted to certainty and fuck everything up, or we can put our addiction aside and go, where can I get real certainty from? And can you even get real certainty? Hi everybody, Jeremy here. Welcome to another episode of the Damn Good podcast, where we explore the future of medicine, essentially, and some very creative ways to start to implement massive change, should you choose, with your practice. So today I'm going to be sharing some thoughts about reduction and what it means to become a reductive opportunist, and how we take complex situations and complex problems and we can oversimplify them, which actually makes us in more trouble than we started out. So this is really important because if you're dealing with patients with health conditions, right? Complexity, the human body is a complex system. If you don't understand complex systems in general, how are you supposed to make medicine work, right? So we need to start looking at some of these bigger factors, bigger forces. A lot of us are familiar with this idea of reductionism. Now, reductionism means you take something and you kind of like keep staring at it and breaking it down until you find the one tiny piece. This is essentially what a lot of our culture is based on in terms of science and how we look at things, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. You just got to know where it belongs. It's got to be in its place, and you can't try to use the wrong tool for the wrong job. So when it comes to reductionism, yes, we can learn a lot, absolutely, but that doesn't mean that that's the tool to use to help solve complex problems. It may be part of the thought process, but it's not the be-all end-all. And we see this because it manifests in our culture via all kinds of things, one of them being medicine, right? Now, I don't know about you, but a lot of patients I've worked with in the past, people that come into like Modern Vitality is my project for people with complex chronic health conditions all over the world, right? I've got YouTube and Instagram and all these things going for that. It's a whole thing. It's an ecosystem, but people come into that ecosystem with a lot of medical baggage. And a lot of times they're very jaded because they've been doing things that led to sometimes short-term benefits, but then like long-term they're just getting weaker, or they're becoming addicted to the interventions. So what do I mean by that? Well, for example, you got somebody with a thyroid issue, right? Oh, okay, well we've reduced, right? Reductionist thinking, we've reduced all your metabolic problems and your lack of energy and all these things that you're talking about and the brain fog and everything. It's your thyroid. You have low thyroid hormone. So what do? They look at this one marker and they go, okay, well, if we can change that marker, then we will have solved the problem. And now they're giving thyroid supplementation, right? Whether synthetic, natural, whatever, I don't care. It doesn't matter because the laws of the complex system are, if you do the job for the body stops doing the job, right? So over time, and this is a great question to ask if you've got patients like this, say, oh, how long have you been on this thyroid med? How many times have they increased the dose since you started taking it? And you can start to get a sense of how much they're habituating to it, which also means how much they're becoming essentially weaker and more dependent on it over time, not less dependent. This is oftentimes what happens with reductive approaches, is that it sounds good up front. Like, oh yeah, I started taking the thyroid supplementation and now, yeah, my energy's back and I'm feeling a little warmer. Great, cool, you got proof of concept that you're onto something, but the implementation is a short-term strategy just to get proof of concept. This isn't like a long-term thing you can rely on because you're becoming weaker over time. And they know this, right? A lot of times patients come and they say things like, I hate taking my meds. I hate, right? H-A-T-E. Very strong language. Why are they saying that? So I started to ask, what do you mean by that? Like, what is it about it you don't like? And a lot of times what it really boils down to is people feel kind of trapped. Like they've taken a path down this route, and by following it, they're becoming more dependent and essentially weaker over time because of the interventions. And they feel like they're basically borrowing tomorrow's vitality to get through the day because, these things have side effects, right, a lot of times. And that's what happens with reductionism, is we're looking at one separate, distinct variable and thinking that represents the whole system. It's a big mistake. We don't want to make this mistake. Now, I know that we have an audience here of all kinds of people, MDs, right? I've worked with MDs. I've got friends that are MDs. I'm not trying to take a dump all over every doctor in the world, right? Most MDs are lovely, wonderful people who got into the profession to help others. However, all my MD friends, and for those of you listening, most MDs are stuck in a system that's inherently capped and limited and pointed just by its fundamental tenets, pointed at reductionist thinking, which is only going to get you so far with anything chronic or complex. It's just it, right? I'm sorry to break it to you, but if you haven't heard of that yet, welcome to the party, because once we get that through our heads, we can start to understand complexity and complex systems. So here's another example outside of medicine. I'll give you 2 examples, and this is going to get to be a racy little podcast, I think, but these are things worth talking about, right? One of them is education. So this is kind of the classic example of when you take one little variable and try to optimize everything around one variable, you can crash the whole system. So with schools, a lot of times the variable they look at is grades, testing, right? Oh, okay, we need these students to perform at a level that generates these types of test scores. So we're going to optimize everything around that. It doesn't take long before you're teaching to the test, right? Not to the material, not to actual understanding. We see this everywhere. And then what happens is they can create other incentives where it's like, okay, schools with the best performing students with the highest test grades now get more funds and more money. So now the schools are going, holy smokes, we got to teach the test, right? Because we need this budget. And then over time, the ones that can perform really well on the test get more funding. The ones who are not performing well on the test get less. And the ones that are, it becomes very asymmetric. It's a power law, right? Because the ones that were succeeding in this kind of contrived and arbitrary reductionist environment now are just going to continue succeeding non-linearly. And the ones who weren't doing so well, now they don't stand a chance. And you get this really wide disparity between opportunities that people have, right? Based on what kind of school they're in and how they're doing with an arbitrary objective like a test. So I have some thoughts on that as well. And since this is my podcast, I guess I'll share it. One is that testing doesn't test the student, right? Testing tests the system, not the student, right? Think about that. I'm going to explain it because this is something that you really got to dial this in, and I'll come back to your patience on this. But basically, imagine you're the one running a school and you initially think, okay, my goal is to educate the students. How will I know if I'm achieving my goal, right? Well, I need to find out if the material's getting in their head, so I need to ask them. So when students come for test day, they have test anxiety, right? They have the mistaken frame that they are the one being tested. Now we've leaned into this. We've blown this out in our culture. We've lost sight of the truth that tests test the system. The test is a way to gather feedback. How well are our curriculums and our education plans, and how well are our teachers communicating, like all that stuff? How well is that effectively creating an education? Well, we need to have some kind of metric. So we're going to test the students' grasp of the knowledge, right? Students get weird. Oh my goodness, it's a test. It's not you they're testing. They're aggregate testing. They're testing the whole system. Think about it that way. All of a sudden the testing anxiety goes away, right? It's like, we're here to see how well the school's doing, not how well you're doing. You got to think about bigger stuff. Same thing with patients with lab tests, right? Oh yeah, here's my labs and I've got high cholesterol and I've got problems with my blood sugar and whatever else, all of it, right? Whatever metric you're looking at, yes, you're testing the patient, right? But also what you're looking at is the patient's state of existence, their current condition is a byproduct and a result of what? Genetics, lifestyle, right? What's a lot of this influenced by? Culture, behaviors. We're actually testing our culture in terms of health metrics. So when you have a patient who's like, I've got high blood pressure. Oh yeah, you're the only one, right? No, there's a lot of people with high blood pressure. There's a lot of people with metabolic syndrome. There's a lot of people with all this stuff, high inflammatory markers. It's not that there's something wrong with a person. There's something wrong with the system that generates these kinds of lifestyles and behavior choices. We're not testing the patient, we're testing the system. So if you get patients who are freaking out about that, tell them. Say, look, this is what the actual test is revealing, is like how well your lifestyle is aggregating into your current state. Now we have a leverage point because it's like, okay, I need to start to put my mind and my intention into generating a different kind of lifestyle that can now not need to create so many symptoms and lab markers that are out of range and all that kind of stuff. These things are emergent, right? Symptoms, lab markers, they come from something. So when you start to teach your patients that it's not about getting them healthy so their labs look good, who gives a flying fuck what numbers on somebody's lab report? I have so many people I've met who are so sick and they say things like, I'm slowly dying in bed, right? But their labs look fine. Doctor says there's nothing wrong with you. Okay, there's not a direct correlation between what's on the page and what's going on in the person. It can help, yes. Do we need to throw them in the trash? No, right? We can look at this stuff. But we have to keep context in mind. And we have to understand that we're testing the person, but really what we can see with the lab reports is what's our general society doing? Because we have to zoom out and squint at like aggregate data, right? Not just a sample size of one, and we can start to see what's our society doing. And you can take the pressure off the patient because a lot of what's going on with them is because they're a byproduct of the prevailing culture, which is subconsciously wiring their behaviors. So now it's a matter of empowerment and going, hey, you need to look at these things and stop doing automatic stuff just because you're defaulting to it, like the status quo of what the culture has, because the culture's sick. The culture's fucked up. It just is, right? It just is. Whether that's intentional, accidental, who knows, right? Who knows? I don't think it's accidental, to be honest with you, but it's just one man's opinion. So when you start looking at this stuff, you go, okay, we can't just optimize around a lab marker or some reductionist thing. We've got to look at this whole person. You just have to. And what I'll also offer here, and this is kind of the second example, this was where it's going to get a little hairy, because I know people are in different stages of what they believe and what they're open to and all that. I'm going to push it I'm just going to go out here and push it today. When you look at a complex system like the human body, there's also other complex systems like the weather, right? A lot of variables. Some people think a butterfly can flap its wings and cause a tsunami on the other side of the world. These things may be connected, right? Butterfly effect stuff, who knows? Who knows? Because it's a complex system. The weather is such a complex system that we have all these tools, yeah, to gather data and pull metrics and do basically like a lab test on the human body, right? But you can do it on the weather. And still, the weatherman's always wrong, right? Or the weather lady's always wrong. It's like a joke. It's like a running joke, right? Like the weatherman's the best job in the world because you can go out there and be wrong every single day and you still have a job. Yeah, that's the joke. It's because it's a complex system. There's unknown unknowns interacting in unknown ways. We can get close with the weather. We can think like, okay, you know, you've got an 80% chance of rain or whatever it is. It's percentages, right? There's not a lot of absolute black and white stuff. So if we were to look at the weather as a complex system, right? And we start to zoom out and go, okay, what's the weather doing over time in certain regions? We start to look at the climate, which is again a product of a complex system. And we start to see all these things and go, it seems like there's change happening with that, with the climate. If we reduce that down to one thing, one metric, one marker, CO2, carbon emissions, right? Or methane, something like this. It's basically trying to take that reductionist medicine approach that fucks things up, and you're trying to apply that to the whole planet. Good luck. Good luck, right? Now, why would people do that? Are we dumb? Are we stupid? Are we short-sighted? Maybe. I mean, maybe we're short-sighted. I think a lot of it has to do actually with you can become what I call, I've had to make this term up because I haven't seen it anywhere, a reductive opportunist. A reductive opportunist. That is somebody who can roll into a complex situation, right? And opportunistically take advantage of the people in that situation by giving them a scapegoat, by giving them a reductionist target, even though it may have nothing to fucking do whatsoever with the whole situation, right? So I warn you in medicine, do not become a reductive opportunist. Oh, yeah, it's your iron levels, your iron's low. We just got to get you on iron supplementation. Maybe, right? Maybe. But if you're looking at a complex system, maybe the body's sequestering iron somewhere else, right? If you're only testing serum levels, how do you know that there's not iron stashed away somewhere, like in the cells, right? And maybe why would the body do that, right? Is the body stupid? Is the body dumb? Maybe the body knows that there's a lingering pathogenic infection and that bacteria love eating iron. And maybe it's trying to hide that from them, which also means it hides it from the labs. And now you jam those iron supplements into the patient to try to like fix them because you think you know better with one little attribute you're looking at. We're meddling with things, right? We have to be able to take a larger view and start to ask deeper questions before we go interfering with complex systems, right? And what's the incentive? Well, some people are incentivized by like, I'm just trying to help. This is the best we have. I've got this one lens. It's reductionist. It's how I look at the world. I'm trying to solve problems. You got to start paying attention because over time, it's like you start looking at your feedback cycles and going, wow, I'm actually making things worse with this approach by and large, right? Not always, but by and large. And again, I'm not trying to take a dump all over Western medicine because if a tree fucking fell on my head right now in the forest, I would want to go to the hospital, right? I don't want to go see, a homeopath or something for that, right? I want to go to the trauma ER, like, let's stop the bleeding, do all the stuff, yeah? But that's a short-term job because that's where those types of approaches tend to thrive. They do very well with emergency medicine, very, very well. We can learn a lot from that. But do I want to have my emergency medicine treatments stretch into a Band-Aid that I'm not dependent on for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever years of my life? No, because reductionist thinking, it takes time, but you'll start to see those feedback loops and go, oh my God, we didn't know. No shit. So why don't we act like we don't know now and stop meddling with things we don't understand? We can start zooming out. And we have, I'm in a very privileged and lucky position to say this stuff, but we have medical traditions that go back thousands of years with herbs, breath work, acupuncture, stretches, self-care stuff, right? Self-massage. There are so many things you can be doing that are tried and true, that have gone through long and many feedback cycles and been shown not to fuck things up. And actually you can use this stuff to make yourself stronger over time. You can tap into hormesis. You can become anti-fragile, right, as a human being. Why would we focus on this short-term stuff, right? So there's one, it's like, hey, I'm trying. This is all I know. Well, okay, great. But all you know is not working in these cases, so we need to actually start learning more stuff. And one of those is you have to put down the frame entirely of reductionism just for a moment and try to look at systems and how different subsystems all connect and interact. And that's where you start to develop a true sense of awe for our human body and for the ecosystem around us. It's amazing. It's amazing the things you discover when you start looking at what changes what. Like even these trees. I just saw a paper about bird song in the morning, right? Trees respond to the sounds of birds chirping in the morning. Whoa, isn't that crazy? It makes things open up more. Who knew we were living in such an interconnected ecosystem? You start to develop awe and respect for what you're working with, right? So there's one is like, hey, I didn't know, I don't know. Well, now, you start paying attention, you start going, okay, there's gotta be other ways to think about this stuff, more holistic ways, right? Now another one would be, I do know, I don't care, I wanna make some cash. And this is where the reductive opportunist really kicks in, because if you can come into a complex situation and go, oh yeah, it's just your iron levels, and sell the iron supplements, whether people get better or not, you're getting that short-term cash grab. And this is where the whole snake oil thing comes in, right? But I mean, we've been hoodwinked by just some, and it's exactly what I'm talking about, right? It's reductive opportunists coming in at grand scales, trying to take complex problems, isolate it down to one thing, and then make a fuck ton of cash off of that one thing, whether it works or not. There's a next level of that too, by the way, while I'm onto this, which is there's not even a complex problem, but you roll up into town and create one so that you can sell your fucking reductionist thing. Okay, people are doing that too. Welcome to Earth. If this is the first time you've heard of this, like, hello Neo, you've been unplugged, look around. There's people that are very smart and unethical, and they don't give a fuck about the long-term effects of what they're doing, right? Just look around. Why is this important to know? Jeremy, why are you trying to red pill me on a beautiful autumn morning with your damn good podcast, right? Because your patients are part of this. The people are coming to see us for help. They don't exist in a void, right? We are getting culturally influenced by reductive opportunists who are creating problems out of nothing, getting people to believe there's a problem when there wasn't one, and then selling them a bullshit solution that doesn't even fix the problem that doesn't exist, but actually makes it worse. Okay, think about this. And now you got people coming to you for help, hoping you can fix them with a supplement or an acupuncture point or an herb or something. Yes, we can. We have leverage there, right? But the bigger leverage, the more influential pocket is to look upstream and go, this is a bunch of bullshit, right? Once you do that, now you are entering the world of belief, which, by the way, I'm taking my chances making this video because I'm doing the same thing with you right now. I'm talking about stuff that you may have closely held beliefs around. But guess what? I want to talk to and work with open-minded people, just like I am, where I can take a belief and I can take an assumption and I can pause it. I can say, okay, I'm not sure. I've been operating as if this was true for my whole life, but now here's some new things to look at. I'm going to set this aside, right? This happened to me in a big way with climate change and global warming. I was reading some things and I started seeing some videos and people were talking about this stuff and I was like, listen, I thought that was settled. I thought we knew that the planet was heating up and polar bears were going to be extinct and all this stuff and that it was all from people's carbon emissions, right? I started finding different videos. I started reading different things, hearing different people talking. And I was like, these are difficult questions to confront, right? I had to take something that I was pretty dead set I believed in, right? Set it aside and start looking at it from a different angle. One of the things that really did it for me was looking at, there's historical trends they look at, like back in the day when the planet warmed up and there were also rising carbon levels, right? So they say, okay, well that's it. You know, the planet was hotter and there was higher amounts of carbon. So there's the cause. However, two things about that. One, we know correlation and causation are not the same thing, right? Two things can happen independently of each other simultaneously. Two things can happen as a result of one thing causing both of them, or they can be causally linked directly, right? So just because you see two things happen at once, like right now, I'm talking and the leaves are falling, it doesn't mean my voice is knocking the leaves off the trees, right? These are unrelated things. Two, the other thing that really kind of caught me off guard with this was going, okay, this is really interesting because you can actually see on these graphs, like the data we have is that the climate got hotter and then the CO2 rises. What's up with that? How can it be retroactively causing that, right? So it's kind of was like a weird time in my life where I had to start to re-examine a lot of things that I just took for granted or believed, right? And I'd imagine somebody stuck in a reductionist system or, you know, whatever beliefs you have, right? They've gotten you to where you are, but if you want to go to a next level where there's more leverage, you've got to be willing to set aside those beliefs, if only for a moment, and be open-minded. We still have critical thinking. We don't have to be fucking idiots just accepting everything, right? But we have to accept some things to even critically think about them. So this was, it was difficult for me. It was a growing opportunity. But what I started to realize was that the carbon in the atmosphere was coming from the oceans back in the historical cycles, right? Rising temperatures and then rising carbon. Well, how does this work? Well, it's coming from the oceans. Just like if you ever take a soda, right, or sparkling water or something like that, it's cold, usually, right? You want that cold, so it's got bubbles in it. If you take a soda out of the fridge, open it up, and leave it on the counter, what happens? It gets warm, and as it gets warmer, it can't hold on to the gas inside it, and that gas comes out, and then we have a warm, flat soda, right? So we can see how temperature, right, colder temperatures allow gases to be trapped in liquids better. Warmer temperatures allow gases to come up and out of the liquid, can't hold them as well. So this makes total sense to me. Right? I started looking, going, that's interesting. Maybe carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, some of it, all of it, a bunch of it, I don't know, right? But a lot of it may have come out of the oceans because they warmed up. It was being stored there, then it came out. Interesting. What else happens to carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? Well, it turns into trees. Right? If we limit CO2, we start to limit tree growth. Is this smart? I'm not sure. Are there downline consequences of that? Most likely. But this is the Pandora's box that you open up when you're willing to go reductionist on a complex system. Oh, we need to decrease the carbon. Well, what happens now? We got the opportunists, right? Why would somebody advance this kind of narrative? Is because they want to achieve some kind of goal, financial, spiritual, power goal, control, whatever it is. If you can make enough people feel guilty about carbon, you can control them. Oh, sorry, you guys can't have cars because carbon, so you're going to have to not travel. You're going to have to live in a 15-minute city. Sorry. Oh, you can't have farms anymore because carbon, right? Nobody in the government's worried about carbon emissions when they go throw fucking bombs at civilians that happen to live in whatever country they're trying to destabilize at the moment, right? Nobody cares about climate change when they're jetting off to the G10 summit and all that in a bunch of private jets. Nobody cares about climate change when they're buying $1 million beachfront properties, not worried about sea levels rising at that point, right? Banks are giving loans, 30-year mortgages on sea level, $1 million properties, multi-million-dollar houses. Don't you think if the banks believed in this, they wouldn't be making those loans, right? There's a lot of stuff that kind of opened up for me. I was like, holy shit. I was pretty sure we were fucked. But now I'm actually kind of like relieved that I don't think we are. We've just been grifted by people who are reductive opportunists. So there I go saying it on the internet. But it's for our own development, right? As health professionals, and this isn't just an analogy and a metaphor. This is something where it's like, this stuff comes day to day, right? Because some of my colleagues specialize in things like infertility. Very good at it, right? There's people struggling to have babies. I can tell you right now, I'm a parent. It's one of the hardest things in the world, right? Is to like have kids, and try to be a good parent. It's difficult, it's challenging, right? But at the same time, it's fucking amazing. It's like one of the best things. Not everybody wants to be a parent, not everybody has to be a parent. But if you do want to be a parent and you're biologically having a hard time making a kid, I bet that is heartbreaking. Heartbreaking, right? You want to start a family. So I've got a lot of colleagues that work with fertility, help people get pregnant. I've had conversations with other professionals who say, I'm really good at this, but at the same time I feel misaligned because I've been told that we're overpopulated as it is and that there's global warming. I don't know that we're overpopulated. Look around. Have you ever flown over the US even? I mean, fly over Australia, fly over Canada. There's a ton of fucking space. I think we've been told some stories by some reductive opportunists, right? So set yourself free on that. It's okay to nurture life, to help people create life. It's part of our human inheritance, is just being living things. It's just part of the deal. We want to make more of ourselves. We want to pass that on. We don't have to feel, it's like scraping somebody's nerve, right? Punching them in the bruise of just hitting the shame buttons and going, oh, you need to do less consumption because we're overpopulated. You should feel bad about existing. You need to start second guessing yourself on every little thing, right? So before this gets too dark, I'm just here to kind of say, listen, maybe there's more to this. Maybe we're dealing with, just like in the conventional medical system, we're dealing with the downline ripple effects of over-reliance on reductionism, a false sense of certainty that comes from looking at numbers and thinking we understand a whole system just from a number, just like you wouldn't think you understand a whole school just by looking at a student's grade. You can't. You can't. There's so many factors you can't measure, you have to experience. You got to understand things in different ways, right? Numbers are valid as one part, but it's a false sense of security, false sense of certainty. We can be addicted to certainty and fuck everything up, or we can put our addiction aside and go, where can I get real certainty from? And can you even get real certainty, right? Is it conditional? So this is a big one, right? Some of you may just be like, Jeremy, obviously this is common sense. I had to figure the same things out. And some of you may be like, Jeremy, you're wrong. You're triggering me and you're going against my belief. And I've already made sacrifices because I believe in climate change. And now you make me feel dumb about those sacrifices. And I don't like you. Guess what? This is a growing opportunity. We're all growing, okay? If you don't like my ideas, it's fine. It's fine, right? But I tried, right? I tried to open your mind. You don't have to take my beliefs and jam them down. I'm taking you down the same path where my mind got opened, and I'm showing you the view. It's pretty interesting when we start looking at this stuff because it translates over to medicine. If you're working with patients, you need to be aware of this stuff, even if you don't believe it. Maybe they do, right? Now you can relate to them a little bit better too. Because imagine if you had very, very fixed beliefs about, for example, overpopulation or climate change, and somebody comes to see you for fertility, right? And immediately you go, well, you shouldn't have kids anyway because we're overpopulated. Is that the spirit of medicine that you signed up for when you started down this professional journey, right? Or is there something a little deeper and a little more human where we need to be able to nimbly set aside certain beliefs conditionally and start looking at other things and saying, well, maybe there are people out there who don't have the same morals and ethics that I do. Because when we're good people, we tend to project onto others, do unto others, right? That kind of thing. And it's like, well, I don't hurt anybody, so why would somebody else be out there trying to trick us about cow farts? That's crazy. Conspiracy stuff, right? Tinfoil hat. No, there's bad people out there. Bad stuff happens to good people sometimes. The world's not inherently fair all the time. It can be total chaos sometimes. And some people are ignorantly destructive and some people are consciously destructive, right? It's out there. So we may not want to play that game, but we should know that it's possible that our culture is being influenced in that way. Heavy emphasis on reduction, some emphasis on opportunism, some emphasis on creating problems so that they can offer solutions for the problems, right? It's kind of one of the old business models. If you sell glass, go around, break a few windows. Business goes up, right? It's that kind of idea. So I'll leave you with that. A lot of stuff to think about. Talk soon. Get to work.